19, verses 1 through 4. This is the word that came to Jeremiah from the Lord. Go down to the potter's house, and there I will give you my message. So I went down to the potter's house, and I saw him working at the wheel. But the pot he was shaping from the clay was marred and in his hands. So the potter formed it into another pot, shaping it as it seemed best to him. This is the word of God for the people of God.
Thanks be to God.
Amen. You can open up to that chapter because we may be looking at it a little bit later. Chapter 18 of Jeremiah in your Bible. If you don't have your Bible or on your Bible app, it seems like the world is spinning out of control. And it is spinning. But guess what? We're on the potter's wheel. The title of the message today is The Power of Clay. To know that we are just dirt. God took dirt and He breathed life into us as human beings with His Spirit. And you know, the streets of the New Jerusalem and heaven are going to be paved with gold. And why are they paved with gold? Because dirt is too precious. Think about it. Because of us. And sometimes we need to remind ourselves, because the Bible tells us that we should humble ourselves, or God will humble us, and we don't want that to happen, because He opposes the proud. And so once in a while we need to remind each other we're just dirt. But we're precious dirt because God breathed the Spirit into us. God is the potter and we are the clay. And how can the clay tell the potter what to do? Now many of you have heard this story before, this joke. And it doesn't make any difference what your IQ is. No matter how smart you are, you're going to make mistakes. But there was an airplane, and there was the pilot, there was the smartest man in the world, and a Boy Scout. And the plane started to go down and it was going to crash. And so the smartest man in the world said, well, the world needs me. So he grabbed what he thought was a parachute. There were only two. There were not three parachutes. So he thought he'd jump out first because the world needs me, I'm sorry. He jumps out. Then the next person looks, and it's a pilot, and he says to the Boy Scout, well, I've lived a long life, and I've done really well. You're just starting out life. You take the other parachute, and you jump. And the Boy Scout said, Captain, I'm sorry, but the smartest man in the world just jumped out of the plane with my backpack. Sometimes we're not all that smart as dirt. We need wisdom from God. We need knowledge from God. Doesn't matter what your IQ is. God uses the foolish things of this world. And He forms us on His wheel as He's the master potter and we are the clay. I'm going to talk about 5 things today about the clay. That would be us. And this is number 1. The wheel is willing. The potter is willing. But the power to become what the master potter has in mind is up to the clay. It's up to us. It's up to you and I. The clay must yield. The clay must stay there on the wheel as it's spinning around. As we're spinning around in this world not knowing what's going to happen next, things seem to be out of control. But maybe we're just on God's potter wheel and He's forming us and He's molding us for His honor and His glory. And He's getting us ready for eternity. And He's making us into a vessel that's going to be fit for His use. Did we ever think of it that way? So many times we want to jump off the wheel. And it's our choice. We can do that as the clay. Are we walking in circles or are we riding the wheel? I don't know about you, there are many times I get off the wheel and I try to live my own life and I'm just walking in circles. And God can't form me, and His hands can't be upon me. And I see this in other people. They just seem to go through the same cycles in life. And then they pass it on from generation to generation. And you see some families, they have like a generational sin. It just carries down through the generations. Israel marched around the same mountain for 40 years until they learned what God wanted them to learn. Knowing and learning are not the same. There is a big difference. You can know all about God. You can know the Scriptures. You can know that Jesus Christ died and rose again for your sin. You can believe all that. You can know all that. You can know a lot of things. But learning is different. Learning is putting it into practice daily. Learning is not having to go through the same thing over and over and over again. Some of us are tested over and over again in the same area of our life or temptation in our life because we won't stay on the wheel and let the potter mold us and shape us with His hand. We don't like the spinning around. We don't like the pressure of His hands on us. It doesn't always feel good. But if we remember that He's shaping us into something glorious, something of great use, then that changes the way we would feel. Most of our walking with God is routine. It's not spectacular. It's not fireworks. It's not awe-inspiring displays every day. Wouldn't it be nice if it was, if every day we saw God do a miracle? But most of our life is just routine. And the power of routine is what saved the prophet Daniel. Remember, he prayed the same prayer every day, every morning. And so when the king wanted him to bow down and worship him as God, Daniel already had an answer. He got thrown into the lion's den, remember? And he's just there hugging those lions. They made sure those lions were nice and hungry. But they didn't touch Daniel at all, because he knew what it meant to stay on the potter's wheel. He had learned by routine. Do we have good spiritual disciplines and routines that's going to keep us in the day when trouble comes? It's going to keep us in the time of when tribulation comes upon this earth. Are we ready for the next big thing? I'm going to share this. I'm going to be open about it because I don't know why. Doctors seem to talk to pastors more openly than they do other people. And between Bonnie's doctors and my doctor, plural, 4 of them have said, what are we going to do when the flu comes in a few months? And the last doctor said this to me just this past week, and I'm not going to give the doctor's names. Said, what are we going to do when the flu comes, the flu season this year? Because that's deadly, and this is not. That's what the doctor said. And the doctors, and I heard the nurses in the place say that too. You see, it's not going to change. We are getting clearer and closer, and as we had administrative council on Monday night, we talked about what happens in Matthew 24. We are on the verge of the end times. We are almost there. Jesus is coming back, and all that's going to happen is plague's going to come upon plague. And we're all here hoping that everything's going to go back to normal, and it's not. And maybe that's a good thing, because maybe we'll stay on the wheel now and let God shape us and mold us. Amen. Let's go on. We're still on number 1. The potter is a God of a second chance. Aren't you glad for that? I am. God puts us on the wheel, slaps us on there, and He begins the process of molding us and shaping us into His image. Not our image, but into His image. And when we can't or we won't cooperate, the power to become is limited by what we allow. Let me say that again. The power to become is limited by what we allow. We have the choice. God will shape us, but we have the choice whether we're going to stay on the wheel and let Him do it. God is patient. He doesn't throw us away. He will make us again and again. If you look at verse 4, we read earlier, look what it says. It says, but the pot he was shaping from the clay was marred in his hands. So the potter formed it into another pot, shaping it as seemed best to him. Not best to what I think. Most potters give clay 3 chances. I don't know if anybody does pottery here or ceramics. But our God gives chance after chance. Aren't you glad for that? Because he's such a forgiving, loving God. God's will for the clay is God's will for you and for me. If you're still there in Jeremiah, look at verses 5 and 6. It says, Then the word of the Lord came to me, he said, Can I not do with you, Israel, as the potter does, declares the Lord? Like clay in the hand of the potter, so are you in my hand, Israel. We are nothing more than a glorified mud ball. That's what clay reminds me of, you know? It's a big, gooey mess. And Danny was joking around. He said, maybe I should bring some Play-Doh. I said, yeah, maybe you should. Maybe we get a better picture. It'd be a great illustration. But we are just like a giant mud ball. And the power is in us, the clay, as we allow God to shape us. We can either be just a mud ball, or we can be a master vessel, a vase or a vase, whatever you want to say, in the master's mind, and make us into what he would bring more glory and honor to him. I want to read to you 2 Corinthians, and if you're quick with your app or whatever, your Bible, you can turn to it also. But look what it says in 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verses 7 through 9. 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verses 7 through 9. But we have this treasure in jars of clay, talking about us, to show that this all-surpassing power is from God and not from us. We are hard-pressed on every side. We can say that right now, can't we? We are hard-pressed on every side, but not crushed. We're perplexed, but not in despair. Persecuted, but not abandoned. Struck down, but not destroyed. That's what it feels like, what we're going through right now. But really, we're just on the potter's wheel. And he's making us into jars that will bring him honor and glory. And then there's Jeremiah 29:11, which most of you can quote. It says this. It's Jeremiah speaking for the Lord. He says, For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you a hope and a future. God still has a hope and a future for us today, no matter what we're facing in the world. Aren't you glad to hear that today? That's an encouragement. The second thing about the clay is this. Your final surrender, not the struggle, is what matters to God. Let me say that again. Your final surrender, not the struggle, is what matters to God. When you and I surrender to God, we surrender to the power of becoming what God wants us to become. Judas Iscariot did not. Remember, Judas betrayed Jesus. He was only 51 days away from having his name in the foundation of the city of God, the New Jerusalem. He was only 1,224 more hours away from having his name in the foundation of the city of God. Instead, the enemy entered his heart and he became rejected clay. We need to hang in there and stay on the wheel. Amen? Stay on the wheel. The third thing about the clay is this. Yielding to the potter brings joy. It doesn't say it brings happiness. It says it brings joy. We can have joy in the midst of all kinds of problems. Because the joy of the Lord is our strength. And the enemy wants to steal our joy. He wants to steal the joy of our salvation. Sometimes life is rough and tough. It's been sort of rough and tough lately, hasn't it? But rose petals falling on rocks never produce precious stones. No. Constant happiness never produces strong, effective people. Number 4 about the clay. You will be under pressure on the wheel. I will be under pressure on the wheel as God squeezes us as we're going around and around spinning. We need to stay on the wheel. Sometimes we don't understand what other people are going through. We tend to judge them. And they could be under severe pressure on the wheel, and we don't understand it. I've had people say to me, well, you must have done something wrong. You must have some sin in your life because you're sick. I pastored one church where they wanted me to raise people from the dead. I said, well, why don't you do it? Really, literally, they wanted me to raise people from the dead. They wanted me to raise this one lady who died, who smoked like 2 packs of cigarettes a day, and she was already dead and embalmed. And I said, nothing like giving me a challenge. She's already embalmed too. Got to put the blood back in her. And so then when my wife and I got sick, the people in the church, the leaders in the church got mad at us because we believed that something was wrong with us. But no, we were on the potter's wheel, and God was shaping us and molding us for something greater, for His honor and His glory. Wow. It takes the pressure of the potter's hands to make us into His valuable possession. We need more power to become. And we become as we yield to the potter's hands, squeezing us and shaping us and molding us, and sometimes taking us and slapping us back down on the wheel and starting all over again. The power's in the clay, and we are the clay. Finally, the 5th thing about us as the clay. Have faith in God's will. Have faith in God's will. Some of you are saying, wow, this is starting to make sense to me right now. I'm on the wheel. T.F. Tenney said this. He's a great preacher from Louisiana. I don't know if he's still alive or not, but this is what he said. He said, there's an old adage that says, for every problem under the sun, there's a solution or there is none. He must have been a poet, too. If there's one, seek it till you find it. If there isn't one, never mind it. You can wear yourself out trying to get off the wheel He has sent to design you. A mark of maturity in Christ is to understand there are some problems that cannot be solved. You must just live through them. And so when we start to judge other people, we don't know where they are in the process of being on the potter's wheel. Amen? Amen. Peter said this, and it's in the Holy Scriptures now. He said, cast all your care upon Him because He cares for you. As you're spinning around on the wheel, do that. Throw all your care upon Him because He cares for you. David said this in Psalms 37. He said, I've never seen the righteous forsaken, nor his seed begging for bread. So that's why we need to stay on the wheel. So how are we going to apply this to our life? Applying this to my life. So I'm giving you a very practical thing to do. I just quoted 2 scriptures that are so easy that you probably already know them. So it won't be hard for you to memorize them. That's 1 Peter 5:7 and Psalm 37:25. Read it every day this week, especially as you're watching the news. All right? Especially as you're getting the latest report. I've never seen the righteous forsaken or his seed begging for bread. Throw all your care upon Him because He cares for you. Stay on the wheel.